Trevor Noah called out Nicki Minaj at the Grammys yesterday for supporting Trump, and she went completely off on X, calling out Jay-Z, Beyonce, and Chrissy Teigen. She made some pretty wild accusations saying that your favorite artists take babies from other countries and mutilate them as a form of sacrifice. She said that Jay-Z and other powerful elites do this in order to gain and stay in power. But that's not all she said about Jay-Z. She went in on this man and said that he's a PDF because he took advantage of so many young girls like Aaliyah and Foxy Brown and Beyonce. He was in his mid to late 20s when some of these girls were about 15 or 16 years old. Now, this is kind of ironic coming from someone like Nicki Minaj, because wasn't her husband convicted of attempted rape in 1995? Her husband tried to force himself on a 16-year-old girl with a knife, and he did get prison time and is now a registered sex offender. And even though Nicki knew all of this about her husband, she still defended him, she married him, and she had a child with him. So what's really going on here? Then she came for Chrissy Teigen, basically saying that she's actually a man. She was definitely feeling embarrassed from the Grammys, so she just started posting tweet after tweet after tweet of everyone she can think of. But in all seriousness, I feel like politics mixing in with pop culture has turned these very important issues into entertainment for a lot of people, and it's kind of hard to take it serious at times, because why is someone like Nicki Minaj, out of all people, speaking out for Trump? Like, what is actually happening in 2026?
Morbid Facts, Part 892. In 2015, actor Steve Rannazzisi, best known for playing Kevin on The League, publicly admitted that he had lied for more than a decade about surviving the 9/11 attacks. He had repeatedly claimed he was working on a high floor at the World Trade Center and narrowly escaped when the planes hit. But after journalists discovered that Merrill Lynch had no offices in the towers and that Rannazzisi was never there, the actor confessed the story was fabricated and that he was actually in Midtown Manhattan. The admission sparked widespread backlash for obvious reasons, with many accusing him of exploiting a national tragedy and the trauma of real survivors, permanently damaging his reputation. Here's a video demonstrating the potency of the venom from a Russell's viper. Russell's vipers are among the most venomous snakes in the world, responsible for tens of thousands of serious bites each year across Southeast Asia. Their venom contains enzymes that aggressively activate the blood's clotting factors, forcing clots to form through the bloodstream. Here's what that looks like in human blood. These abnormal clots can block blood flow to vital organs, increasing the risk of strokes and heart attacks. As clotting factors are rapidly exhausted, the blood loses its ability to clot where it's needed, intentionally leading to internal bleeding, shock, and organ failure.
Daddy, 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 hurry! I saw something scurry!
Oscar!
What the heck is that? That's not Oscar. That's two green eyes.
There.
Hey!
Daddy,
Anybody down there?
I've been learning about animals today. Asian elephants are more closely related to woolly mammoths than African elephants. Worker ants will take a bunch of 1-minute naps in their day to allow themselves to sleep more than 5 hours a day. This is what the x-ray of a pregnant dog looks like, and I don't know how many puppies are in there, but feel free to count. This is the Luzon bleeding heart bird, or aka the stabbed pigeon, where obviously it looks like it had been stabbed in the heart. This is a time lapse of what it looks like when seals fall asleep. The sloth bears found in India and the inspiration for Baloo from the Jungle Book are actually considered to be the most aggressive bears in the world. This sea slug can behead itself and then within less than a month grow an entirely new body off of the head. This is the bay cat, and these have been seen less than 100 times in recorded history, and they weren't even found again for 60 years after the first time we found them. This is a super zoomed up photo of what the scales of a butterfly wing look like. Camel spiders will scream when they are being threatened. Sloths don't have the ability to fart.
If you eat too many apples, you will turn into a disturbing creature. Let's talk about a strange horror game all about an apple invasion. Applecalypse. Full playthrough of the entire game is on my channel. On a random day, everything stops in the town you live in. Strange images of apples flash on the television screens, and it starts doing strange things to the minds of the people in the town. This is where the game starts, and in the point-and-click sections, we can even see a giant floating apple in the sky. What is happening here? The actual gameplay of the game involves throwing apples into people's mouths in order to satisfy their hunger, and once we do this, they mutate into something disturbing. The new forms involve some gimmicks that block the apples in order to up the challenge, since the entire experience involves racking up combo points to clear the stages. So then what is really happening here? Why are people being brainwashed into eating apples that turn them into strange things? Is someone trying to turn the world into monsters?
A young girl in Indiana was hospitalized after accidentally overdosing on her mother's weight loss medication. Jessa Melinda, now 8, was found unresponsive after injecting herself with GLP-1, what she thought was stomach medicine. She became violently ill after injecting herself with more than half of the pen. Jessa was rushed to the emergency room after non-stop vomiting and abdominal pain. She didn't eat for 6 days straight, her mother said, describing the incident as the worst week of our lives. Now she's urging parents to lock up their medications, warning that the consequences can be life-threatening.
This is a serial killer you haven't heard of that has more victims than Ted Bundy, John Wayne Gacy, and Jeffrey Dahmer combined. The Sunday morning slasher. Carl Eugene Watts targeted mostly young, attractive women walking alone in the dark. He would stab, slash, strangle, and drown them. Watts told a psychiatrist that they had evil eyes, and it wasn't enough to murder these women, he had to kill their spirits too, by burning personal items or tossing them in a sewer. His first victim was 19-year-old Gloria Steele, a mother and college student who was stabbed 33 times in her apartment. Michigan authorities knew he was responsible for dozens of murders, but they never had enough evidence to convict him. In 1982, Watts fled to Texas and resumed his murders, killing at least 12 more, including the youngest victim, 14-year-old Emily Lacroix. Now let's get to the moment he was finally caught. On May 23, 1982, Carl Watts choked Lori Lister until she was unconscious, then dragged her up the apartment steps. He used her keys to open the door and came face to face with Lori's roommate, Melinda Aguilar. Melinda was choked by Carl Watts as well, but this time she pretended to black out. He bound her hands behind her back and put her in a separate bedroom, while he filled up a bathtub where he planned to drown Lori Lister. With her hands still bound behind her back, Melinda quietly locked the bedroom door and proceeded to jump off a second-story balcony, where she yelled at a woman who was drinking coffee outside to call police. Unfortunately, Texas prosecutors offered immunity to Watts for the 13 murders he confessed to, in exchange for a 60-year sentence. Oddly enough, he was almost released from prison in 2006, but Michigan authorities were able to convict him of 2 murders before that could happen, and he died in prison in 2007 from prostate cancer.
Extra Morbid Facts, Part 132. Daisy Coleman grew up in a family marked by repeated tragedy. In 2009, her father was killed when their car slipped on black ice and plunged into a ravine in Missouri. In 2012, at age 14, Daisy was sexually assaulted while incapacitated and left outside her home in freezing temperatures. Despite hospital records documenting injuries and extreme intoxication, the charges were later dropped, and she was publicly discredited, triggering years of vicious harassment. In 2013, the family's home burned down under mysterious circumstances, and in 2018, Daisy's younger brother Tristan died in a car crash, mirroring their father's death. By 2020, Daisy was struggling with severe PTSD, harassment, a reported stalker, and learning she couldn't have children, a condition doctors said may have been linked to the assault. Under the weight of it all, she took her own life that August at the young age of 23. 4 months later, her mother Melinda also died by suicide. Daisy's story was documented in Audrey and Daisy, released while she was still trying to rebuild her life.
Why did they intentionally model Jimmy Crystal after an evil predator from the UK? Because it's literally confirmed that that's what they were going for in 28 years later. Also, hi, I'm Grace. Can I be your horror girly? I don't agree with it, obviously, but I had to figure out what the reasoning was. What did they think was justifiable about this? So this is what I discovered in my research. They did this for thematic reasons, because Seville himself was a once loved, now hated public figure. This is kind of like a nod to distorted history. So the director, Danny Boyle, and the writer, Alex Garland, explained that in the film's post-apocalyptic world, society had forgotten a lot of its history and it clinged to fragments of the past. So they took Seville's image because it shows how people can misremember or misinterpret or even worship past icons without remembering or understanding their real meaning. So Jimmy Crystal was modeled after Jimmy Seville, like his image, and then him making all of them be called Jimmys and the whole gang looking like him, because people turn famous figures into myths and they ignore who they actually really were. And these old bad ideas can survive and become dangerous because nobody is there to question them. And these symbols in our pop culture can turn into cult-like figures. And this is happening because people are just clinging to them for comfort. It's nostalgic, but they're not really thinking about who these people really are. So the flashy look, the tracksuits, the blonde hair, the jewelry, it's there to remind us that someone who was once admired can become something scary when the truth is forgotten or ignored. So that was their reasoning. Let me know your opinion on this. If you want more information about Jimmy Seville, it's the video I just posted. And follow for more freaky.
This mom pushed her son on a swing for over 43 hours. 24-year-old Romisha Sims was a mother to 3-year-old Jair Lee and was from Maryland. Romisha dealt with depression, bipolar disorder, and schizophrenia, but that didn't stop the love that she had for her son. On May 22nd of 2015, Romisha and Jair had walked from the Deluxe Inn motel that they had been staying at for a couple of weeks to a nearby park. On that specific day, it wasn't a nice sunny day. It was actually a little chilly because the night before it had rained. At some point while they were at the park, Romisha suffered a psychotic episode and she kept hearing voices in her head telling her to keep pushing her son on the swing because if she were to stop, he would die. So for the next 43 and a half hours, Romisha pushed her son Jair on the swing and had no idea that he died. A person who was walking in the area of the park eventually noticed, and they're the ones who called authorities. Once authorities arrived, they found Jair deceased, and he didn't have any kind of trauma to his body, and Romisha was sent to a psych hospital. Just 2 months before this happened, Jair's father had filed paperwork in court because he wanted to get full custody of him because he felt like Romisha's mental health was unstable and she was not fit to take care of their son. The medical examiner revealed that Jair's cause of death was due to dehydration, low body temperature, and his death was ruled as a homicide. Romisha was indicted on charges of manslaughter, child neglect, child abuse, and she later pled guilty so that she would avoid jail time and not have to go to a psychiatric hospital. Romisha was also given a 5-year conditional release, so she had to abide all court orders, take her medications, and go to all her doctor's appointments.
Imagine if the punishment for murder wasn't executions, but instead numerous amputations being done to the person. So this man here is Willie Bingham. He had just been found guilty of unaliving a young girl and essaying her. While in his cell, he's approached by a man who pretty much explains Willie's fate to him, tells him that he's going to face a series of amputations, and the severity of these amputations pretty much depend on the family of the victim and how far they're willing to go. Willie requests to just be offed, but that request is denied, and he's forced to have his right hand cut off, and then he has to give lectures to teens talking about violent crimes and why you shouldn't commit them. And as time goes on, he's forced to give more lectures and more lectures, all the while he's literally being picked apart piece by piece. He loses his left arm, both legs, a kidney, and a lung. Pretty much when he didn't think it could get any worse, it got worse, and he had his man part cut off. And then pretty much after this, he loses his will to live, not even speaking a word after this. After this, he faces one last surgery where he loses the tip of his tongue, his nose, both ears, and an eye, and all the while the victim's family was allowed to watch. But after numerous surgeries go on and on, only the dad is left watching this final surgery. And by the end, Willie is left in a zombie-like state, not being able to hear, see, taste, smell, or even move, as he's wheelchair bound, left looking at the ceiling.
Death penalty in different countries. USA. Electric chair. Indonesia. Firing squad. China. Lethal injection. North Korea. Firing squad. England. Life imprisonment. United Kingdom. Burning alive. UAE. Stoning. Germany. Buried alive. Lethal gas inhalation.
Baffling Butterfly Effects, Part 6. In the winter of 1931, a young Danish carpenter was struggling to make ends meet for his 5 children. His wife had died a year earlier, and he was desperate to feed his kids, so he began building and selling a new type of children's toy. Just when things were starting to take off with the business, an electrical fire burned down his factory and his entire supply of wood. The carpenter began making toys out of plastic instead, and that's why we have Lego.
Morbid Facts, Part 891. Here's a police sketch that was released during the investigation into the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann, a case that remains unsolved nearly 2 decades later. In 2007, Madeleine vanished from a holiday apartment in Praia da Luz, Portugal, while her parents were dining nearby. She'd been left asleep with her younger siblings, and when her mother went to check on the children later that night, Madeleine's bed was empty and the bedroom window was open. As the investigation dragged on, police issued multiple suspect sketches based on eyewitness accounts, including one female person of interest that later drew widespread attention due to its striking resemblance to Ghislaine Maxwell, the British former socialite who was convicted in 2021 of trafficking girls for Jeffrey Epstein. Despite one of the largest missing child investigations in European history, no definitive trace of Madeleine has ever been found, as her fate remains unknown. Dan Burroughs was a high-ranking white supremacist in the 1960s, serving as the 3rd highest member of the American Nazi Party and a Grand Dragon of the New York KKK. But in 1965, the New York Times revealed that Burroughs was actually Jewish, raised in a Jewish family, attended Hebrew school, and even had a bar mitzvah. Hours after the article was published, Burroughs took his own life, and the organizations he led immediately disavowed him as the revelation became public.
Give me your answer, do. I'm half crazy. All for the love of you.
You have to hear this. Archaeologists have reportedly found the bones of giants. The claims center around a place called the Lovelock Cave, a remote cave in the Nevada desert with a history much darker than most people realize. According to reports and early accounts, massive human skeletons were found inside the cave, some allegedly standing between 10 and 12 feet tall, with more extreme claims reaching well over 20 feet. But the size wasn't the scariest detail. Several accounts describe reddish hair still attached to the skulls, a detail that immediately echoed a terrifying Native American legend. The Northern Paiute spoke of red-haired giants who were said to live in caves, raid nearby tribes, and eat human flesh. What makes the story even more unsettling is what was reportedly found alongside the bones: tools, weapons, and materials suggesting that these beings weren't primitive, but organized, intelligent, and culturally advanced. Some researchers claim that imaging of the remains showed unusual bone density and reinforced skeletal structures capable of supporting enormous height and weight, features that don't match human anatomy. That's when people started to wonder, could these giants be the Nephilim from biblical texts and the Book of Enoch? Or do they resemble the giant races found in Norse mythology? Across cultures, the warning is the same. Giants lived among us, they consumed us, and they had to be destroyed. So were these just stories meant to frighten? Or was Lovelock Cave a mass grave for something that history was never meant to remember?
Yo, what's up? These are Kids That Killed, Part 5. Today on our list, Erin Campbell. On July 2nd, 2018, 6-year-old Alicia McPhail was nowhere to be found throughout her house. Her parents searched her room, the living room, and every other part of the house, but she could not be found. But the crazy thing was her bicycle was still parked out on the curb, so she couldn't have gone far. I mean, she was only 6 years old and didn't have a habit of running away, so her parents began to worry. But it turns out that this 16-year-old psychopath Erin Campbell had actually contacted Alicia's dad the night before, trying to buy some drugs. And when he went to pick him up and Alicia's dad wouldn't answer, he snuck inside the home, grabbed Alicia while she was sleeping, and kidnapped her. Alicia then woke up while she was being carried around by her kidnapper, and he told her that she had nothing to worry about and that he was a friend of her father's and he was going to get her home safely. But that was far from the truth. It'd be shortly after the young girl woke up that the 16-year-old would move on to brutally beat, rape, and kill this young 3-foot-tall 6-year-old girl. It wouldn't be until the morning after this incident where the parents and neighbors would have a search party going out to look for the young girl, and they would find her dumped in a woodland area about 15 minutes away from their home with over 117 different injuries on her body. It was said that they found trace evidence of semen on this girl's body, and it was even claimed by forensics that she was beaten long after she had already died. It was later found out by the police during an investigation that Aaron Campbell was the one who committed these horrific acts on this young girl. And at the age of 20, when he was in prison already, he actually got beat and his front tooth went through the top of his lip. Sorry, Aaron, but you got what was coming to you.
Famous autopsy. Today we're talking about Chris Farley. Chris was found on December 18th of 1997 by his brother John at his 60th floor apartment in the John Hancock building in Chicago. Reports indicated that in the 4 days leading up to his death, he'd been on a major drug and alcohol binge, which leads us to his COD, which was an accidental overdose of cocaine and morphine. These two drugs mixed together is called a speedball, and that was exactly what took him out. The autopsy, which was released in January of 1998, he was rolled in weighing 296 pounds, 5 feet, 8 inches, and it showed the long-term effects of substance abuse and the extreme weight on his body. He had advanced atherosclerosis, specifically a narrowing of the arteries supplying the heart muscle. All 3 of his coronary arteries showed significant signs of narrowing. Both of his lungs contained fluid buildup and congestion, which is something pretty common in people who use opiates and heroin. As for his liver, it showed fatty changes, which is something common in heavy drinkers. Therapeutic levels of the antidepressant Prozac was found in his system, as well as antihistamine and weed. On the day of his death, he had a red, bloody fluid coming out of his nose and a white, frothy fluid coming out of his mouth, which are kind of indicators of drug-induced distress. Rest in peace to Chris, and as always when I'm talking about addiction, you're never too far gone. You can always turn the other cheek and get yourself back together. So yeah, it's pretty scary.
There are some crazy parallels between Scream and Scream 7 you don't want to miss. In Scream 1, Ghostface invades a normal life and turns it into a survival game overnight. In Scream 7, it's the same idea. Except the killer isn't just crashing Sydney's world. Sydney now has a family and a daughter the same age as she was when Ghostface first attacked her. And the killer is coming for everything Sydney built after surviving all of it. Scream 1 is, can I survive? Scream 7 is, can I protect the people I love? Scream 1 literally invented the meta horror rules convo. But Scream 7 isn't just playing by horror rules. It's playing by legacy rules. Because Sydney isn't just a random final girl anymore. She's the original survivor. And that makes Ghostface scarier. Because now the killer can not only weaponize her past, but her traumas, and everything people think they know about the story. Also, Scream 1 is just landlines and don't go upstairs. Scream 7 is in the modern world, which means panic spreads faster, rumors spread faster, and Ghostface can turn into a spectacle in seconds. So yeah, Scream 7 mirrors Scream 1, on purpose, and it's gonna be brutal. It's not who lives, it's what can get taken from Sydney that she can't get back. Check out Scream 7, only in theaters on February 27th.
Yo, what's up? Here's some scary facts about our world that you probably didn't want to know. Part 44. There is a type of shark species known as the Greenland shark that can live upwards of 200 years. One, because it is adapted to the cold water in the Arctic Ocean, and the second reason is because it'll eat anything that falls in the water. That means polar bears, penguins, and anything up above. If you were to travel to space in a spaceship, traveling the speed of light, let's say at age 15, when you came back 5 years later, you would be 20, but all of your friends, well, they'd be 65. There is a condition known as the Cotard syndrome, otherwise known as the walking corpse syndrome, in which people suffer from believing that they have never existed and that they have been dead this whole time. If you go to a Catholic priest and tell him that you murdered somebody, they can't say a word because of Catholic law, and they will keep your secret. Please don't get any ideas.
Another cold case has been solved after 4 decades thanks to advances in DNA technology and genetic genealogy. On November 15, 1984, motorists in San Luis Obispo, California noticed a suspicious camper van parked at a turnout along PCH, and they specifically noticed blood was dripping from the door. When police arrived to check on the van, they found a woman's body inside. 41-year-old Dorothy Toby Tate had been shot to death through the driver's side window and then dragged to the back of the van where she was found. She was a waitress from Colorado who had been traveling around California with her 2 Australian cattle dogs, and at the time she was staying at the San Simeon Creek campground near Hearst Castle. The day before she was found, the day she was killed, she had taken her dogs for a jog on the beach, and investigators believe she had just finished her jog when she was ambushed. Investigators found some evidence at the scene, including a trail of blood leading from the camper and a can of Coca-Cola. The blood was determined not to belong to Toby, but it couldn't be identified. Missing from the van was $400 in cash, along with Toby's purse, credit cards, and new Nikon camera. Investigators believed this was a robbery turned murder, but unfortunately the case quickly went cold and remained that way for more than 4 decades. But last week, the SLO Sheriff's Department announced they had found Toby Tate's killers with the help of modern investigative techniques, including DNA genealogy analysis. And there were 2 killers. The blood evidence found at the scene was submitted for genetic genealogy testing and was linked to a man named Stephen Richard Hardy. And fingerprints found on the can of Coca-Cola were officially linked to another man named Charlie Sneed. Hardy and Sneed were friends from Texas, and they were known to always be together, and it is believed they may have been traveling in California because Sneed had gotten into trouble with the law back in Texas. 2 actually returned to Texas not long after Toby's murder, where Sneed was charged with kidnapping and sentenced to 40 years in prison. He was released in 2009 and died 5 years later from natural causes, and Hardy died in 2003 from natural causes. So neither of them could be charged with Toby's murder, but they have finally been identified as the killers. While she did not see proper justice, at least her family now has answers. Rest in peace, Toby.
This is one of the most disturbing fallout shelters I've ever seen in a game. Let's talk about a disturbing psychological horror game about a bunker's secret. Rat. Human error. Our main character is Bree, a child that's known nothing but war. The Great Flash seemed to have ended everything, and then one day we wake up in a bunker with no idea how we got there. And wait a minute, where is our mother? The game involves us crawling through the vents, meeting new characters, and finding out more about what's going on in this particular bunker. It seems like everybody we meet is sick and mutating in some way. And after we find some old pictures, we realize that a lot of these residents look completely different before they got here. We keep hearing about a character called the Doctor and the procedures he keeps doing on the residents, like this nurse who he lobotomized very early on, basically taking away her free will. And the food recycling program that the government was boasting about post-war, those sauces and soups are made by processing human body parts. But recycling is a more marketable way to put it. I have a full playthrough of the game right now on my channel if you're interested, but there are also a bunch of different paths and secrets in this game. Your playthrough might look different than mine.
Savannah Guthrie's mom, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, is missing from her home in Arizona, and the sheriff has said that her home is a crime scene. Savannah Guthrie is a co-host of the Today Show, and it is being reported by the Pima County Sheriff's Department in Arizona that 84-year-old Nancy, her mother, is missing. Nancy disappeared on Saturday, January 31st, and searches for her have been ongoing since then. At a press conference held today, the sheriff said that time is very critical as Nancy lacked physical mobility and that the scene of her home showed signs that a crime had taken place. The sheriff said she has physical ailments and some physical challenges and is in need of medication that if she doesn't have in 24 hours could be fatal. And they said that if anyone knows anything about where Nancy is or has seen something, to call 911. He said, "We saw some things at the home that were concerning to us. We believe now, after we've processed that crime scene, that we do in fact have a crime scene, that we do in fact have a crime, and we're asking the community's help." The sheriff also said that they have reason to believe that Nancy was of great sound mind and did not leave on her own. He said that teams have been working through the night to review security camera footage, license plate readers, and conduct searches, and they are going door to door in the neighborhood looking for Nancy. Nancy has brown hair and blue eyes, 5'5", and weighs around 150 pounds, and it is currently unknown what clothes she was wearing at the time of her disappearance. If you have any information, see or hear anything, you can call 911 or call the Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. Searches are ongoing, but she really could be anywhere, so please help spread this as far and wide as possible so we can help find Nancy.
Not so fun fact to completely not just ruin your day, but your entire year. Okay, so I'm assuming you already know that the president, baseline, is a rapist. We know this from women's stories, women's testimonies, his own words, and a jury of his peers. Baseline. He doesn't like being told no, and he loves control. He's been caught doing this for decades. He would just pay off the damages. President is a rapist. But then the uncomfortable thing that people don't really want to keep talking about for some reason is this man was also best friends with the most notorious child sex trafficker of our time. This man had connections. Can you name anybody bigger? I can't. It was Donald Trump's best friend. We know this because of the investigation files into this man. Donald Trump's not in them just 1 or 2 or 10 or 100 or 1,000 or even 10,000 times. He's in it 38,000 times. He was an active participant with his best friend. He's not his best friend. Yesterday he called it. He said, I never went to Jeffrey's Island. Jeffrey's Island? Jeffrey's Island. Come on, man. If we're allowed to know this stuff, what are they not telling us? And what's the worst part about this whole Epstein files, which needs to be turning into trials really soon, is the government has said, oh, we're taking all this time, we're not releasing everything, we're trying really hard to redact everything. And then they'll leave a victim's name or a victim's face and a victim's body, by the way, which they had to take out. They'll leave all that and then redacting the names of the buyers for these people. And they're trying to twist it and say, oh no, this was 15 and 16-year-old, 15 and 16-year-old. You're still getting death, dude. We have images of him with little girls. We have girls when they were little saying that this happened to them. And we need this dead man's emails to try and maybe believe them. Maybe you believe them, but I'll tell you right now, the worst part about this not so fun fact is that there are people around you, your neighbors, that are either denying this or actively encouraging it.
So I came across 2 paranormal photos, and I'm going to compare them side by side right behind me. I kind of want to see how many people can spot the difference because these photos were taken seconds apart, and I'll prove it to you. For context on the one that you're actually looking at, this was taken inside of a child care center, and the person who did post this, they had permission to share this photo and from all of the parents who were involved in this picture because nobody can explain it. Now compared to this picture, this is the second photo. Does something look different, particularly in the center of this picture? I'm gonna zoom in for you. As a quick aside, consider following and sticking around because I post videos almost every single day. Okay, so we're back in. So focus on these 2 girls right here. Again, this is picture 1. I'm gonna swap over to photo 2. The woman who took this photo and everyone in that care center that she showed it to could not come up with an explanation for this. I'm telling you, you can go back, you can compare these photos yourself side by side. There are very minimal movements, which effectively shows that this was taken only a few seconds later. But who is that? Every other child and person who was in the room was accounted for, so there is no explanation for who seems to be standing behind this girl.